by the one, the only Kimberly Archie.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
What is going on? How are you? Welcome. What's going on today?
Well, we're just in the middle of the ongoing part of the Girardi bankruptcy, and then also the competency hearing stuff on the criminal charges here in California. So that's the thick of it for right now.
I am in LA as well. I split my time between New York and LA. So yeah, I mean, there is a buzz here in LA about all of this. I'm familiar with your personal story, about, your son. I know you lost your son in a motorcycle accident, and then you realized afterwards that he did have brain trauma from playing football, and you were an advocate of that, and you were filing your own lawsuits. I mean, my first question to you is were you pursuing, was that all happening simultaneously where you were taking legal cases and trying to pursue to become a legal consultant? Was that totally separate from going to Tom for help? Did it all happen at once?
No, so what happened is 20 years ago this November, my daughter was injured on her high school cheerleading team. And I had been a cheerleader and I had coached cheerleading. And so when my daughter got injured, it seemed really insane, for lack of a better word, that kids were in the hands of these adults and they didn't even have a first aid kit or an emergency plan. I wasn't upset about sort of the nuances, but more of the big picture stuff. How come it's not required if you're going to have kids doing acrobatics, and gymnastics, to have an emergency plan or a first aid kit? So my daughter broke her arm. It was a double compound fracture, so both of the bones are sticking out of the skin. I happened to be there when it happened because I was there to pay my bill, just ironically. And so the emergency plan was really me. I cut up a carpet or maybe someone cut it up for me, but either way, we had to cut up a piece of carpet. I made a sling with it, and then I picked my kid up and took her to the ER. So that's what really got me on this path of where I am now, which is sort of, there's so many layers to this that gets lost in the story. And so I was on this quest as a legal consultant and expert witness in cheerleading when I was taking this legal class and the professor showed the Erin Brockovich movie. And I was so fired up after seeing it that I wrote an email. I fire off this, I go to the contact page on the website, fill it in, and within minutes, my phone is ringing. Well, I'm writing to the law firm at the time was called Masri and Vitito. That's where Erin Brockovich worked in the movie. But what most people know now is that law firm gave that case to Tom, and Tom's the one who actually settled it and was the reason for, at the time, the largest settlement of its kind. And that's how I met the Erin Brockovich lawyers. So it had nothing to do with my son. This was 2008. It was a long time ago. So a good couple of years before my best friend Kathy's house blows up. And so PG&E, the same company that's in the movie Erin Brockovich, blows up my childhood best friend's house, and her whole neighborhood is destroyed. 8 people are killed, 35 homes are burnt to the ground. So, that's where the link to Tom really begins, is with my friend Kathy.
What are the chances of that, right? That, you're studying to be a legal, consultant and expert because of your daughter. You have this happen to your son. You write in because you see Erin Brockovich, and the same, company happens to Kathy, who happens to be your best friend. And that's how you refer her to Tom. That's just so, because I think that does get lost in your story where there's so much talk about Tom now, but I just wanted to clarify that, because that's so many things happening at once, right?
And Tom, he was up against a lot of competition to get the Ruigomez's business. They interviewed a lot of lawyers. Lawyers were crawling everywhere after the San Bruno explosion. I think they interviewed 5 or 6 law firms. And, Tom did his usual, razzle dazzle.
Did he get that business because of, in part because of you and, your childhood best friend and that connection? Like, was that part of why he won it?
I mean, I would say that it's fair to say that they interviewed him because, I mentioned that I had seen this movie and that I had been talking to these lawyers and the stuff they had told me about PG&E. I mean, every time I would tell them about sports, they would tell me a story about PG&E and how terrible they were. So imagine, my whole drive from LA to San Francisco, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm remembering all these horrific stories about the stuff PG&E had done to victims. And I'm thinking, oh my God, not only did her house get blown up, but kind of by a really shitty company that you can't, you got to take really serious that they may not do the right thing.
Yeah.
So the introduction did come through me, but he certainly had to earn the business and, for the Ruigomez, as a family to pick him. So, that was really on him.
Was it truly, like before all of this came out, like Tom was, yeah, the Aaron Brockovich lawyer, like, an esteemed lawyer. Like, was it really like it's made out to be in the media? Like, wherever he went, people would kiss the ring. He went to the private club. You hear about all these lunches and just everyone kissing the ring of Tom.
I think that stuff is understated, frankly. I think about it all the time. I wish I had taken a video camera around with me to some of the events that I went to, especially the legal conferences. There's this one conference that always sticks out in my mind. And I was sitting there with a bunch of famous lawyers. Okay. These weren't little random attorneys. These were all big wigs, like people who had championed big causes on a national level, won 100 trials, just like Tom. And we're all sitting there talking, and they're talking about these pet cases that are difficult, and how they want to litigate them and how, who they want to do them with and stuff like that. And they ask me, well, what are you up to? So I tell them about, my cheerleading company and how I want to go after them and how I want Tom to do it. And they all laughed in my face. Like they laughed as if I didn't know him. And I'm sitting there in my mind thinking, well, I could just call him at home right now, or call him at the office, or just talk to him at the Jonathan Club, but I didn't say anything. I just sat there and took it all in.
Wow. Did you see anything like, I mean, obviously, the housewife and the hustler, like hindsight is 2020. Like when you were there with Tom, like, was there any tip off? Was there anything strange, no matter how small? Or, I mean, I know hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, well, in hindsight, there I could give you a whole trail. It's kind of like being in a toxic relationship and you didn't know, and then afterwards you're like, "Oh my God, how'd I miss this or how'd I miss that?" I really got to give, the credit really to my best friend Kathy. She's the one who started picking up on things and started